That's at 10 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, Carol Radziwill, I need to talk about her a little bit. Okay. John Kennedy Jr. is on the plane. His wife, Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, is on the plane. Carolyn's sister is on the plane. Carolyn's, Bessette Kennedy's best friend is Carol Radziwill. Carol Radziwill is married to John's cousin, who is John's closest friend. I may not have believed that the first time that I heard it, but I read the book and did some more background checking. I'm very much persuaded. In any case, she talked to Carolyn Kennedy just before the plane took off. They were supposed to have dinner the following night. She's an Emmy Award-winning TV news producer. She's not a babe in the woods, right? The person who can produce news for television and who can win an Emmy for doing it knows how to make a phone call, knows how to call up an agency, knows how to deal with bureaucracies. And she got a phone call at midnight that the plane was missing. And from midnight until 2 a.m., she called every FAA facility on the East Coast, pretty much. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. She wouldn't have called facilities that couldn't possibly have helped, but I think it is safe to say, not an exaggeration in the least, that she called every FAA facility that could possibly have had anything to do with this, and none of them would help her. You're not supposed to have to try to get the FAA to help you. If you call up the FAA and say a plane's overdue, they're not supposed to ask you to justify them conducting a search. They're supposed to conduct a search. Right now, because you said the plane was missing, they're supposed to immediately begin a search. They completely ignored her. And at 2:15 a.m., she gave up trying to get the FAA to do anything, and she called the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard said, Kennedy? She called the Boston Coast Guard. And they said, Kennedy, we're on it. And they notified the media that Kennedy's plane was missing, and they immediately jumped into action. Unfortunately, they immediately called the FAA. And the FAA said, hang on a second, and they called the Air Force. And the Air Force called the Coast Guard and said, go search Long Island. This is an order. We are now in charge. Go search Long Island. And they sent them 150 miles away from where the plane could possibly have gone down, where they wasted their time for the next 15 and a half hours. At 11 p.m., this is according to the book The Day John Died. I don't have any other source for this, although I did find one article, I don't remember if it was in the Boston Globe, that Kennedy was furious at the FAA, didn't say why, said that there were very bitter feelings between Edward Kennedy and the FAA because of the events of John's death. At 11 p.m., the story goes from the Boston Globe, I believe, that, I'm sorry, this was The Day John Died, that he started calling the FAA and could get absolutely no action out of them. At 6 o'clock in the morning, he woke up Podesta. He called the White House and woke up Podesta. At 7, Podesta woke up Clinton, and Clinton woke up the Air Force and told them get some planes in the air, which they did, scattering them all over the Atlantic and directing them away from the crash site. According to the New York Times, at 5 a.m., a detailed study of the radar had been completed. This is 5 a.m., and when do you suppose they sent search vessels to the crash area? At 1:30. This is 15 and a half hours after the plane crashed, and somebody do the math, 8.5 hours after the New York Times said they had the most detailed radar report imaginable in their hands. 8.5 hours later, the Coast Guard said, and I have the video of it, we don't have the radar information, but the luggage is washing up. We're on the shores of Martha's Vineyard. We're going to go search the waters off of Martha's Vineyard, and if you don't count that, I have no idea when if ever the researchers were given the radar information about the location of the plane crash. But at 1:30, the Coast Guard said we're going to defy the Pentagon and we're going to go in based on the debris. A 15 and a half hour delay. Now, I want you to pause for at least a second and think about that for a minute. This is the Kennedy family, right? There's a senator involved in this. They're used to their family members being assassinated, and you're going to thumb your nose at them in this sort of a way. I mean, this is an incredible provocation, don't you think? I think that, right, this sort of a delay is just an incredible provocation. The file you're attempting to play has an extension that does not match the file format. I don't know what you're talking about. We're not going to worry about it. No. Do you want the player to play with file? I'm going to say no. I don't know what's going on. Oh, that's why. Yes, I do want it to play the file. Can I go back and try it again? Okay, let's try.
What kind of file is it?
I don't know. Well, it's just, no, it's not a file. It's part of the, on my computer, it plays without asking the question. It's part of the.
Well, but it was like an MP3 file originally.
It's embedded, originally, I don't even remember. It was embedded into the PowerPoint, into the PowerPoint. An AIF, it was originally, it might have been a .mov. Let's see what happens. We'll tell it yes. And we're going to tell it yes and see what happens. Nothing's happening. I'm sorry. And if we have time and if people are really dying, I can walk across the hall and get one of the videos. Right, the video that I made, it has the Coast Guard spokesman talking to WCVB TV in Boston. This story was all over the internet. Well, it was, if you were looking for it, it was widely displayed on the internet that Todd Burgun, who was the chief petty officer and he is the Coast Guard spokesman, comes on the television and he says that John Kennedy contacted the tower, that the contact was at 9:39, that he was on final approach, and that, I guess that's the end of the story. At 9:39, John Kennedy was on final approach and approximately 14 miles off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. That was at about 10 o'clock in the morning. At around noon, the Pentagon took over the reporting of the news and they killed that story. They didn't make any reference to Burgun. They just said that Kennedy did not contact any of the air traffic control facilities. His flight instructors say that's outrageous. Kennedy was the most careful, cautious, rule-following pilot, and one of the most basic rules there is, if not the rule number one, is that you contact the air traffic control facilities. The Pentagon says he didn't. This guy, so let's look at that, right? The Pentagon says no, Todd Burgun says yes, and quickly to compare them. Burgun is a professional. He does this sort of stuff every day. He knows the people at the FAA because he talks to them when he has to make a report to the news people. He knows the people in the news, right? And he knows that corridor between the guys who collect the information and the media who are anxious to get it. He walks that corridor. He's professional at doing it. In any case, set that aside, the fact that he's a skilled professional. The NTSB, a year later, a year after the plane crash, issued their report, 350 pages. In it, they have a very detailed, second-by-second radar analysis of the final moments of the plane. And I got a hold of one of John Kennedy's flight instructors stationed in Martha's Vineyard, his oldest flight instructor, a guy named Arthur Marks, and we went over it in detail, and he said John was on final approach. What it describes is exactly what would have been typical for John's flight into Martha's Vineyard. I think he flew 8 times in the previous 2 months. So, I mean, this was saying typical, you're saying a lot. This is a flight that he made a lot, and according to Arthur Marks, what is described in the NTSB report is John's plane on final approach, holding at 2,500 feet, which is what you have to do before you contact the tower. So John's plane was holding it, right? This story by the NTSB, the radar report, completely, in every way imaginable, corroborates Burgun's report, that the plane was on final approach, 14 miles off, at 9:39 exactly. Well, how could Burgun have come up with a false report that was false about the tower contact, but accurate in every other way? Where could he possibly have gotten that information? Well, obviously, I think it's very, very obvious that Burgun was telling the truth. Now, the fact that Kennedy contacted the tower, and I'll say that, the fact, as I hope we just established, that Kennedy contacted the tower is very important for a couple of reasons. One is if you contact the tower and say you're on final approach and you don't land, FAA regulations, within 5 minutes, if you don't land, they're supposed to begin a search. If you contact any of the air traffic control facilities, and this was explained to me by the head of the NTSB, the guy who signed as the chairman of the NTSB report, explained to me, and I don't remember in what context, certainly not in this context, he explained to me that if you contact any of the air traffic control facilities, that your plane is required to have a transponder, and they give you a code and you type it in, and your transponder emits a signal that is picked up by the radar that tells the FAA where you are and who you are and what your altitude is. And, most importantly, if your plane descends lower than 100 feet any place but on the runway of the airport that they said that you told them that you were going to, it sets off an alarm. at the FAA headquarters. The point is, they knew that Kennedy's plane was in trouble before it hit the water. It set off an alarm. If he contacted the tower, which I think we have demonstrated that he did, his plane set off an alarm before it hit the water, and it took him 15 and a half hours. An alarm that told him what the crash location was. And it took him 15 and a half hours to send somebody, which is just an enormous provocation to the Kennedy family. Well, what the hell is going on? I'm going to quickly throw in Sherman Skolnick. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of him, and I don't want to say anything bad about